This issue of Meadow Afternoon will find us sewing with fabric scraps, mending with patches, baking bread, colouring with markers, and discussing English paper piecing. This video is kindly sponsored by Ohuhu. More about that later on. June appears with warm afternoons and blue skies. Green leaves and towering stems grow with enthusiasm in the garden. These are the early months of summer before the laziness and haze of August creeps up, when the summer dresses are pulled out and straw hats found again. Let's begin with a project in the studio and make something I've been needing. After journaling, I usually end up with little pieces of scrap paper which I want to save to use on the next page. However, by the time I'm ready to work on another page and after the studio has been tidied, I often can't find those little pieces of paper when I need them. Let's solve that and make a home for those paper patches. A few supplies gathered together: marker paper, a set of 48 pastel Ohuhu markers, cardboard and glue. My finished folder will be 14 by 14 centimeters. To begin, I cut 2 squares out of a piece of cardboard. This was the backboard from an old sketch pad. I always save these as they're perfect for bookbinding. To go with my 2 squares, I also cut out a 1 cm by 14 cm spine piece as well. Those 3 pieces will form the cover of the folder. This process is the same as if you were making a book cover, just instead of filling the insides with pages, I'm going to create simple pockets. The cover is the first thing to make. You could use pattern paper, wrapping paper or fabric, but today I want to create my own design. I have cut out of my A3 piece of paper 3 sections, 1 for the cover and 2 for the inside pockets. To measure the cover section, I simply placed my cardboard squares down onto the paper with the spine set in the middle, leaving a little bit of space either side of the spine between the spine and the 2 outer squares, and then I left about 2 centimeters all the way round for overlap. Once I had all my pieces of cardboard and paper cut out, I could begin drawing. The cover design today is inspired by Patchwork and is created by drawing a series of squares and rectangles on the page and then filling those spaces in with different patterns. It's best to scatter the patterns across the page, so there are never 2 of the same designs in one place. Leaves, flowers and butterflies began to occupy the page. Stripes and spots, the variations of designs that can be used are endless. For the outlines, I used a pen that was both waterproof and alcohol marker proof. It's very important to test out the pens when using alcohol-based markers, as you don't want your outline to suddenly run and become a mess when you start to colour. I always find the colouring process relaxing, picking one colour at a time and watching that colour fill in the white spaces. It's like watching a puzzle take shape. The colours in this marker set are lovely pastel shades, soft pinks, blues, yellows and greys. They speak of early summer mornings and flowers growing in the grasses. Now for a word from this segment's sponsor, Ohuhu. Ohuhu creates quality and affordable art supplies, from a wide range of markers to paints and sketchbooks. The Ohuhu alcohol-based markers are some of my favourite supplies to use. They come in a huge range of colours, have a variety of nib types available, including brush, fine and chisel. You can find a range of different set sizes, and there are also refills coming soon. The markers have beautiful colours, smooth laydown and are easy to blend. You can find more information at ohuhu.com or click the links in the video description. They are also running an anniversary sale until July 7th. Thank you Ohuhu for supporting the channel. Once all my designs were finished, it was time to glue everything together. Applying the glue to the cardboard, I lined up the front cover, the back cover and the spine and carefully glued them all in place. The bone folder was handy here to get out any air bubbles. On the inside of the cover, I cut a piece of cream paper to fit and glued that down. If I had thought ahead a little, I also would have added a ribbon to each side of the book as well. Then everything needed a good press while the glue dried. Here, Dickens was extremely helpful, as always. No doubt Mr. Pickwick's tales provided the weight needed. The pockets I attached with double-sided tape, and then the folder was complete and ready to fill with little patches of paper. I think a ribbon closure would have been a nice touch, but as it turned out the folder sits flat anyway, just something to consider if I decide to make more of these. The folder is a welcome addition in my little studio and also something I can pop into my bag whenever I want to draw outside. A few weeks back, my brother came to me with a familiar problem. He had worn holes through his working trousers. He's very active and works outdoors much of the time. As such, trousers really don't stand much of a chance. Still, I promised I would do what I can. After examining the extent of the damage, I created a range of different sized patches out of some fabric scraps. Patches I've found are always the best way to go with these sorts of mending projects. Trying to sew the torn edges together doesn't create a strong join, and they tend to rip open almost immediately. Patches create a new and much more stable layer of fabric and hide the tear. It's not hidden or invisible mending by any means, but they will extend the life of these trousers, and working trousers that are going to get dusty and muddy don't really need to look that neat anyway. The colour of the patches don't particularly match the trousers, but somehow I actually quite like that. It shows that the trousers have been mended. It tells a story of a piece of clothing that's been well used and well loved. The patchwork here is not fancy or special. There are no elaborate stitches or multicoloured threads. There is a time for that, and there is also a time for something simple and hardy, a time for that everyday sort of patchwork.
Full stop. Can't believe I live in your thoughts. I think about you all the time, morning, evening, and midnight. Such a wonderful delight. Forgo, give up everything that I own. Give it all up now, just to be with you somehow. Unexpected love was found. You're the rose in a garden, and it shows if I'm honest. You're the leaves in mid-August, and I've come out here to say you in my arms, won't let go. The world around could pass us by, a thunderstorm, a lightning strike, as we hold each other tight. You're the rose in a garden, and it shows if I'm honest. You're the leaves in mid-August, and I've come out here to say that I love you. Ooh, ooh, you, ooh, ooh, you, ooh, ooh, you,
I wanna jump around when I think about yesterday. Your smile, your style so fly, my oh my. As time stood still, I got the urge to steal a kiss, and so I did. Now I'm embarrassed, but just a little bit. Oh, there must be gold on those lips and honey on those fingertips. Can you imagine
Let's imagine a beautiful patchwork quilt. Dozens and dozens of tiny hexagon shapes sewn together. Carefully chosen patterns and colours, blending and merging into one design. An heirloom to keep you warm at night, to cover a bed or a sofa. Countless hours would have been spent on its making, cutting and hand-stitching each and every patch together. Treasured and well loved, it occupies a special place in the home. Patchwork quilts like that have a long history, and the history pages today will focus especially on a couple of those that are made with a technique called English paper piecing. The technique uses paper to form the base of the shapes, and then little fabrics are sewn around the paper templates. Those fabric-covered paper patches are then finally sewn together and the papers removed after the project is complete. This technique allows for precise designs and crisp edges. One of the oldest surviving quilts made using this technique dates back to the early 1700s, and as the name would suggest, the method is believed to have originated from England. The papers used in the quilt's construction often help with dating a piece, as some quilts are left unfinished and the papers still remain sewn into the fabric. The papers used historically would generally have been recycled from household items, as paper would have been more expensive in the past. Items such as letters, bills, newspapers and so on would have been cut out to make the paper templates needed. I found two particular examples of English paper pieced quilts, both from the Victoria and Albert's Museum collection, to include in my pages today. The museum has made most of its extensive collection available for viewing online, and they have a wide range of textile items. The first quilt I've picked dates back to the 18th century. It's largely made from silk, and some of the silk pieces date further back in time to the 1680s and 1690s. This particular quilt appears to be unfinished, as many of the paper templates are still left in, and the quilt does not have a backing. The patches have also been decorated further with embroidery. Motifs such as bugs and fruit and scenes from Aesop's fables scatter across the design. The second quilt from the V&A's collection has the familiar hexagon layout that one might expect from an English paper pieced quilt. This one dates from about 1797 to 1852. The hexagons are arranged into little flowers or rosettes and placed across a white background. The fabric in this one is primarily cotton. These two examples display not only different choices in design, layout and colours, but also the change in fabrics available. The later one reflects the mass production and thus lower price of cotton. Fabric to construct quilts like these would likely have been saved up over a long period of time, a factor that's likely to be seen here in the second quilt's 55-year date range. One of the things I find particularly interesting about the history of textiles is how similar the techniques used are to the ones we use today, especially so in this case. While we have a much wider choice in terms of materials, and those materials are easily accessible today, the main techniques are the same as they were back in 1797. Paper is cut into templates, and everything is sewn by hand. The time spent in the past on such a project is roughly the same as the time you would spend making a paper pieced quilt today. The flower quilt from the V&A is a design that could have been made yesterday. those rosettes can be found all across Pinterest and Instagram. These sorts of crafts, ones steeped in tradition and continuity, link us in the present directly with ancestors in the past. Sewing together fabric patches clearly brought as much joy and satisfaction to people in years gone by as it does to us today. After many months of work, I'm really excited to finally have my first shop collection ready and to announce that the shop is open. There are a range of products available: phone bags, zipper pouches, coasters, desk mats, fabric baskets, stitch markers, acrylic standees, bookmarks, pins, stickers, and more. There are also 3 short story collector bundles. If you enjoy the short stories I include in these videos, then check those bundles out. They come with a collectible charm, a print inspired by the story, and a quote bookmark. They are a really nice way to read and to collect short stories. To celebrate, the first 25 orders will receive a little secret gift in their package. Please note that only orders over €20 qualify for this promotion. There will be a link to the shop in the video description box as well as on my website. Now let's travel back in time and hear the story of a paper patch. A Paper Patch, a short story by Ida Williams. The peaceful lull of Wednesday afternoon, settling in nicely and well within striking distance of tea time, was decidedly and abruptly broken by raised voices. Up the stairs they travelled, over the carved oak banister and along the carpeted hall. One by one, the residents of the upper floor rooms left their various pursuits and congregated curiously on the landing. Jack was first, only too happy to find an excuse to leave his mathematics. Cora appeared next, bleary-eyed, a novel in one hand, fingers wedged between the pages to keep her place. The Gothic romance between the plain governess and her broody employer had just taken a turn and tossed the man clear off his horse. Grandpa shuffled over, empty pipe sticking out of his pocket and white nightcap flopped over one side of his head. Grandpa famously disapproved of afternoon naps, feeling certain that they displayed a lack of character. His own clear participation should only be viewed as a momentary lapse in judgment. The group completed itself as Frances joined, sucking her pin-pricked finger. Sewing, even in its most docile forms, had its dangers. When the afternoon is peaceful and each patchwork hexagon could be sewn together with care, injuries would be easily avoided. Conversely, when raised voices shatter the piece, needles cannot be blamed for slipping. Hanging over the banister, the assembled company listened intently to the unfolding scene below. "John, are you certain you had it in here?" Mother's voice carried out of the open study door, steady yet soft. The sound of the desk drawers being wrenched open preceded Father's curt reply. "Yes, yes, brought it home, I'm sure of it. I would have placed it with all the other bills." The sound of books scattering over the floor followed. "Oh, John, no, the mess." "Please, Mary, not now." The banister group decided instinctively to creep down a few steps to obtain a better vantage point. "It's not here." Boots strode over the fallen papers. "Not here, not there, not in any pocket. Could someone have taken it?" The Boots stopped suddenly. "Jack, perhaps?" Grandpa, Cora and Francis all looked up at the suspect, who shook his head vigorously in return. Luckily for him, Jack's defence had already begun in the study. "Really, John, what would Jack do with an old bill?" "Boy's always up to his ears in some scrape or other," Father muttered, and through the open door the family watched him pace back and forth. Mother started picking up some of the fallen books, her long skirts rustling. "Is it really that important?" "I can't prove he overcharged me. He remembers all right, but won't admit to anything without the bill. After all, it's only a pair of boots, and not very good ones at that, dear." "Mary!" Father's voice rose once again to a crescendo. "It's the principal." With that, the Boots came striding towards the hall, and the rest of the family quickly scattered back up the stairs. The principal would exist to bother the household for the rest of the week. It chiefly bothered Father, which in turn upset Mother, and from there it rippled down to everyone, the dog notwithstanding, and generally left a grey cloud hanging around. On Thursday, Father lectured the family at great length during dinner on the subject of keeping an honest business. On Friday, he kept an unfortunate visitor 3 hours longer than necessary, opining on the lack of principles in the younger, and especially footwear-making, generation. On Saturday, the situation improved slightly, the principal only making an appearance in conversation a total of 6 times. Thankfully, by Sunday, the effects were wearing off. Father was serious during church, sulked steadily on the walk back, and stewed all through dinner. Stewed some more after dessert, and finally began to mellow out after 3 thick slices of cheddar and a well-aged glass of port. "Well," he declared with a sigh, "I suppose things happen. Can't win every fight." "No, dear," came the wise reply. Settling comfortably back into his chair by the fire, Father observed the family gathered together in the parlour with pleasure. Jack, who was not up to anything that awful, currently, at any rate, was whittling in the corner, the wood shavings catching in a cloth at his feet. Cora read her novel, the governess was now hearing voices calling her name. Grandpa was dozing, Mother mending a stocking, and Frances worked on her quilt. It spread over her lap in a cascade of patterns and colours. "You've made fine progress, my girl." Father leaned forward and picked up a corner of the coverlet. "I'm over halfway." "Fine work," Father nodded, closely inspecting the stitches. "Don't you think so, Mary? Nearly as fine as yours, I reckon." "Yes, John, she's put in many hours of practice." The peaceful air which had shattered a few days before and morphed into that grey cloud returned now to its former state. Such a state lasted for precisely 3.5 seconds. Turning the quilt over and examining the back of the patches, Father suddenly gave a sharp cry. "Mary, there it is!" "What is, John?" "The bill!" He waved the corner of the quilt towards the shocked faces. Frances stared in disbelief as a sudden and unwanted memory made its way steadily through her head. A distinct memory of walking through the hall and seeing a piece of paper on the floor. Naturally, she had put it into her pocket. She was always using paper scraps on the quilt. It needed so very many after all. Jack had looked up from his wood, surprised and slightly amused for once not to find himself the object of ire. Grandpa awoke and glared crossly at the ensemble. Cora was the only one unmoved by the noise. The moody employer had been maimed, and nothing in the world could have taken her attention at that moment. "I am so sorry," Frances spluttered. "I found it on the floor." Mother smiled at them all. "There, John, it must have fallen out of your pocket. You can get your boots sorted after all." Father opened and closed his mouth silently. The idea of attempting to show the scoundrel in the leather shop a corner of his daughter's quilt as a proof of sale was for the moment beyond comprehension. Frances, eager to be helpful, quickly cut the threads and handed over the small piece of paper. The clearly inflated price and description of the boots were written in black ink. "You know," continued Mother cheerfully, patting her husband's hand, "we're lucky that Frances found it. The servants would have thrown it away when they were cleaning." Father leaned slowly back in his chair and placed the patch of paper into his pocket. The grey cloud hovered for a moment in readiness, in preparation. Its presence would, however, not be required. "Yes, you're quite right, dear." The end. Summer is the season for the garden, for planting and weeding, for pruning and chasing away bugs. And as the weather settles in for those days of blue skies, the garden needs endless watering. Gushing out of sprinklers and watering cans, the thirsty plants drink long. In the spring we planted lettuces and kale, and then as the weather became warmer we added tomatoes and peppers, courgettes and aubergines. Melons and even a few pumpkins made an appearance. The weeks slipped by fast, and almost within a blink of an eye, the garden has grown into a jungle. The lettuces are fully grown and need picking. The radishes are ready, small patches of red popping out of the ground. And the kale keeps going, producing new leaves as soon as the old ones are picked. The tomatoes have formed a canopy, growing their fruit under the leaves. Courgettes are coming fast, each plant trying to outdo each other. And hidden away under the leaves, the melons bide their time. This is the season of magic in the garden, when the harvest starts coming in. Sometimes the harvest is ready, quite a bit quicker than we can eat it, and each day brings something new. This month I'd like to recommend a movie, which some of you might enjoy. Made in 1953, it's called It Happens Every Thursday, starring Loretta Young and John Forsythe. It's a sweet film about a couple who buy a small town newspaper and their various attempts to make it a success. Thank you for watching today's episode. If you're new, welcome. My name is Ida. These are inspirational style videos with seasonal slow living, short stories, creative projects, sewing, history, cooking, and updates for my novels. Think of these videos as a visual magazine coming into your subscription feed once a month. Feel free to say hello in the comments below, and please consider subscribing so you don't miss the next issue of Meadow Afternoon. Thank you to Ahuhu for sponsoring this video. Make sure that you check out the links in the video description for more information. Until next time.